I was walking past the dining room when I heard my mother say my name, like she was testing out a punchline. I stopped. The door wasn't fully closed, just cracked enough that golden light spilled into the hallway. I'd come early that evening, carrying a small wrapped box I'd picked out after a double shift at the garage. Something thoughtful, something that felt right. But standing there in the dim hallway, holding that gift, I realized I'd walked into something I was never supposed to hear. "Peyton," my mom said again, her voice bright with rehearsal energy. Then came the laughter. My father's low chuckle, my older brother Aaron's polite snicker, my younger sister Belle's sharp, performative laugh that she used in her videos. "She'll wear the jumpsuit, right?" my father asked. "The blue one. It fits the theme." Aaron's voice came next, measured and amused. "The toy car will get a reaction." Belle chimed in like she was pitching content. "And the line about oil stains. Perfect. The church will love it." There was rustling. Someone adjusting a script. Someone else timing the delivery. They were rehearsing a Christmas skit. About me. About my job. About the grease that never quite washed out from under my nails. Then my father said it. Calm and practiced. Like the punchline of a joke they'd been building toward for years. "We'll read the will afterward. It'll land better that way." The box in my hands suddenly felt heavier. The hallway grew colder. No one inside paused. No one sensed me standing there, 3 feet from the doorway, listening to my family turn me into entertainment. I backed away slowly, keeping my boots silent on the tile. I walked through the house I grew up in. The symmetrical picture frames, the polished floors, the soft gold lighting that made everything look warm from the outside. I stepped onto the porch and set the box down on the wooden bench by the door. I ran my thumb over the corner once. Then I walked to my truck. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just drove. The neighborhood blurred as I turned toward the highway. My phone buzzed twice. Probably my mom's event group chat. But I ignored it. The only place open at that hour was a 24/7 gas station off the main road. Its neon lights buzzed harsh and cold against the wet pavement. I pulled into a corner spot, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle around me. My hands rested on the steering wheel. The faint smell of motor oil rose from the microfiber cloth tucked in my jacket pocket. The same cloth that had followed me through years of late-night shifts and emergency call-ins. For the first time, I was grateful for that smell. It grounded me. I reached for my phone and called Nora Patel, my closest friend and my CPA. Nora had been with me since I opened the garage at 21. She knew my family's patterns. She understood the silence I'd carried into adulthood. "You okay?" she asked when she answered. I didn't answer that. Instead, I said, "Can you check the lease folder for the LLC?" My voice surprised me. Flat, steady, almost businesslike. There was a pause as Nora clicked through her files. I watched the neon lights flicker on the wet concrete outside. "Okay," she said. "Got it. Why?" "Just open it." I heard her scrolling, then stopping, then scrolling again. "Peyton," she said slowly. "Are you sitting down?" "I'm in my truck." "You need to look at this, right now." I opened the folder on my own phone, something I rarely did after hours. The document list appeared. Payments, lease agreements, notices, ownership forms. My stomach tightened. I clicked the lease for the commercial property in Plano. The property my father's flagship furniture showroom was housed in. The one he bragged about at every holiday gathering, every fundraiser. The pride of Daniel Reed. The tenant name blinked back at me. His LLC. The landlord name blinked back at me too. Mine, not my personal name. My real estate LLC. The one Nora helped me set up when I was 25. The one I'd used to invest in small industrial lots around Dallas. I knew I owned the property. Of course I did. But I had never connected it emotionally to them. Not until that moment. I scrolled further. Payment logs. 3 missed payments. A pending increase in market rent. Significant. A clause about non-renewal that I had highlighted months ago when Nora told me the market was shifting. At the time, it felt like professional due diligence. Now it felt like something else entirely. "They're using your property," Nora said quietly. "And they're behind." I leaned back against the seat. The neon light buzzed overhead, rhythmic and cold. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just let the information settle. Not like a revelation, but like a slow, inevitable truth finally reaching the surface. "What do you want to do?" Nora asked. I stared at the lease, at the rent calculations Nora had written in the margins months ago, at the notices I hadn't sent yet, at the folder of templated documents waiting for me to fill them out. The answer came easier than I expected. Everything by the book. "Okay," she said, already shifting into work mode. "Then let's start." I set my phone on the dashboard mount and opened the laptop I kept in the back seat for late-night paperwork. The screen cast a pale light across the truck's interior, catching the tiny scratches on the steering wheel, the dust on my boots, the faint oil stains on my nails. Nora talked me through each step. I opened spreadsheets, checked payments, calculated overdue amounts, cross-referenced lease clauses, prepared a notice of default, prepared a notice of non-renewal, updated the market rate increase based on the latest comps, linked ownership verification documents, drafted the cover letter for courier delivery. Each step had weight. Not emotional weight, but procedural. Clean, controlled. A kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. At one point, Nora said, "If they planned a Christmas lesson for you, this is just your gift in return." I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. My fingers paused above the keyboard. "It's not a gift," I said. "It's a line." She understood. When the packet was ready, signed, time-stamped, uploaded, I sat still for a full minute. The station was nearly empty. A distant truck hummed as it passed. Somewhere behind me, a vending machine whirred to life. I pressed send to courier. The confirmation pinged softly. I closed the laptop, wiped my hands on the cloth in my pocket, and looked out at the dark highway stretching ahead. "This time," I said into the quiet, "I won't fix what they've broken." Growing up in the Reed house in Plano, everything looked perfect. Symmetrical frames, polished floors, soft gold lighting. But nothing ever landed softly. I was 18 the day I told my family I wanted to study automotive engineering. I remember the smell of dinner in the kitchen, something buttery, something warm. My father, Daniel Reed, owner of a chain of upscale furniture stores, was setting the table. When I spoke, he dropped a metal serving spoon. The clang echoed harder than it should have. My mother, Marlene, the one who coordinated charity galas and kept the family's image ironed flat, blinked slowly like she was buffering. My brother Aaron, older than me, a medical resident at the time, the family standard, lowered his eyes to hide a smirk. My younger sister, Belle, a part-time dental hygienist and lifestyle content creator, laughed outright. A quick, sharp sound. The spoon wobbled on the tile. I bent to pick it up, fingers brushing against the cool metal, leaving a faint smear of oil from the spark plug I'd been working on earlier. No one said it out loud, but the silence filled in the sentence for them. That's not what our family does. After that, the pattern settled in like weather. Marlene would slide job listings across the counter, office assistant, receptionist, never looking directly at me when she said, "This would be more stable." She'd gesture vaguely toward my hands, the faint lines of grease that never quite washed out, especially when you're around people. Aaron, when he visited home, would pat my shoulder with a doctor's practiced sympathy. "Just be careful with all that physical work," he'd say, as if I were one accident away from proving his point. Belle recorded videos in the living room, the ring light illuminating her hair as she told stories about finding balance and elegance. When I passed behind the camera, she'd wrinkle her nose for her audience, an inside joke they weren't supposed to understand. "Oil fumes again," she'd laugh. Her viewers would fill the comments with little laughing emojis. I stayed quiet because that was the role I'd learned to play. My silence kept the house smooth and their image intact. Every time there was a gathering, cousins, church members, neighbors, I walked slower, kept my voice low, and made sure my boots didn't click too loudly on the floor. Quiet was safer. Quiet didn't get me pulled aside later for tone, posture, presentation. The memory that stays with me is small. Me standing at the sink washing dishes, the steam rising around my hands. Behind me, my family laughed at a joke I wasn't part of. I looked down at the water running over the oil-stained crescent near my thumbnail. That was the moment I learned what I was allowed to be in this house, and what I wasn't. Christmas Eve at the church always looked the same. Soft lights, poinsettias lining the stage, the camera crew setting up as if the Reed family were part of the program itself. My mother thrived here. She moved through the hall, adjusting garlands, nodding at volunteers, perfecting what she called the atmosphere of generosity. I wasn't there, but my absence didn't register at first. Inside the banquet room, the early arriving relatives were settling in. My father was rehearsing lines for his short speech. Aaron, celebrated like a trophy, adjusted his tie in a mirrored pillar. Belle checked her phone's front camera every few minutes, smoothing her hair between takes. The courier arrived at 6:47 p.m. He slipped through the decorated hallway, past a children's choir practicing carols. He carried a stack of envelopes, white, clean, official. He asked for Marlene Reed by name. She smiled, assuming they were last-minute donations or RSVPs. When she tore open the first envelope, the expression on her face broke cleanly. First confusion, then a small, precise shock, like a bulb flickering before it burns out. The pages inside slid neatly onto the table under the bright lights. Notice of default, notice of non-renewal, revised market rent, payment ledgers, ownership records listing landlord, Peyton Reed. Her hand trembled. Paper rustled as she flipped pages too quickly. "What is that?" my father asked, stepping closer. Marlene didn't answer. Aaron took one page to read. His jaw tightened. "Mom, this is the showroom lease." Belle leaned over his shoulder, eyes widening. "Wait, Peyton owns the building. The pastor, standing at the doorway, quietly stopped giving instructions to the camera crew. Someone dimmed the stage lights. Even the murmurs from the children's choir seemed to fade. One of my aunts whispered, "Why would Peyton send this tonight?" Marlene's voice finally returned. Thin, unsteady. "No, this has to be a mistake. She wouldn't. She doesn't." But the bottom of the ownership record still read the same. Landlord, Peyton Reed. Not her mechanic daughter, not her silent daughter, not her invisible daughter, the one she tried to turn into a seasonal joke. At 7:02 p.m., my father tried calling me. When I didn't answer, Marlene grabbed her phone. Her earrings shook with the force of her movement. She stepped out of the banquet room, pressing the phone hard against her ear. The first call went to voicemail. The second, too. On the third, I answered. I was standing outside the cabin in Colorado, snow drifting across the porch. I could hear her breath before her voice, ragged, thin, frantic. "Where are you?" she demanded. Behind her, I could hear chairs scraping, relatives whispering, the distant edge of someone crying. She wasn't asking because she cared. She was asking because her perfect program had cracked, and she needed me to help her seal the edges before anyone else noticed. The snow collected along the railing. I watched flakes settle on my gloves. Nora was inside chopping vegetables, humming softly. The cabin was warm, but the cold air felt cleaner. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I said slowly, evenly, "Did you enjoy my gift?" The silence on her end wasn't dramatic. It was worse. Small, stunned, collapsing inward. A silence that recognized, maybe for the first time, that I had stopped orbiting them. "Peyton," she tried again, softer now, almost pleading. But the wind shifted, and her voice thinned out into the static. "I won't discuss this tonight," I said. "All communication can go through the LLC inbox." Her breath caught. "You can't." "I already did." I let the silence sit for a moment, not as punishment, but as distance finally measured. Then I hung up. The snow kept falling. The phone stayed still in my hand. Inside the cabin, Nora set another log on the fire. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing pulling me back toward Plano. The morning after Christmas, the cabin was quiet in a way the Reed house had never been. No stage decorations, no curated lighting, no soft, rehearsed laughter leaking through doorways. Just the sound of wind threading through the pines and the soft crackle of the fireplace Nora had started before sunrise. I sat on the small porch with a mug warming my hands. The snow had fallen heavily overnight, burying the steps in a smooth, unbroken sheet of white. My boots left the first marks when I stepped out there, each print sinking cleanly into the surface. Inside, Nora moved around the kitchen, her presence steady and unobtrusive. She didn't ask about the call or the documents or the fallout. She knew better than anyone that silence could be a kind of shelter. I checked my email only once. A message from Daniel, my father, sat at the top. Short, no greetings, no scolding. Just logistics about transferring operations, points of contact, payment timelines. Professional. Measured. The kind of email he would send a vendor or a landlord. For the first time, he was speaking to me in the role I had built for myself. I replied in the same tone. Short, clear, boundaried. Then I closed the inbox. The rest of the morning passed in small movements. I swept snow from the railing, brought in firewood. tightened a loose hinge on the cabin door. It felt good to fix something where the repair didn't cost me pieces of myself. When the sun rose higher, the light shifted across the clearing, catching on the thin crescent of oil that stained my thumbnail. Still there from the night I left the house. In Plano, it had been the punchline. Out here, it was just a mark of the work I'd chosen. I stayed on the porch until the cold pressed gently at my fingertips and the air steadied in my lungs. There was no rush to return, no expectation to meet, no version of myself I had to shrink into. Just the snow, just the quiet, just the space to finally breathe. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're the quiet shape of what you refuse to carry anymore. Standing on that porch, watching the snow erase every footprint behind me, I understood something simple. Distance can be a form of respect, both given and taken. I didn't send those documents to hurt them. I sent them because I was done being the punchline in someone else's story. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop letting people use you as the cost of their comfort. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.